So Chappie was a thing that happened. I've already talked in length about this movie in the POS podcast with Jim, and Jim actually did his own review of Chappie, so if you want to check that out, go check that out. I'll have a link to both of those things in the description. Now, Chappie comes from Neil Blomkamp, the same director of District 9, which I loved when that came out. And he also directed Elysium, which I did not see, and he's also going to be directing the next Alien movie. And if Chappie is any indication of how the Alien movie is going to play out, I don't really have high hopes for it. Now, before I get into the bad stuff, let me tell you what I liked about this movie. First of all, the reason I wanted to see it in the first place is because I love artificial intelligence. As I've said before in my review of Her, which is actually a much better movie about AI. And I think the movie does propose a few questions about AI and how a learning robot could be sort of like a child, just learning very fast. Another thing I did really like about this movie is the motion capture. Chappie and the other police robots look really good. It's even better than the new Planet of the Apes series. And as I pointed out in the podcast, it's probably because they're inorganic, since they're not actually things that really exist. Chimps and apes really exist. These robots do not, and also they're just made of like metal parts, so they look more believable. So when I was watching the movie, I actually believed that they were there. They almost looked like puppets. But not moving like puppets, I mean like somebody in a suit controlling the robot, even though it was completely motion capture. Though that's essentially what motion capture is, it's kind of like a digital puppet. And the other thing I like about the movie is the score, which is again by Hans Zimmer, which is one of the only things I liked about Interstellar. So yeah, the music's pretty good. Now for the bad stuff. The commercials and trailers leading up to this movie were very misleading. They would have you believe that the character that you're introduced to in the beginning with Dion is the character that you're going to be following throughout the whole movie, but he's not. It even starts out in that documentary style that District 9 did, and how he's all excited to experiment with AI. And we follow him for a bit, but only for about 15 or 20 minutes in. After that, the movie is mostly about this rap group called Die Antwoord? I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce their name, but apparently Neil Blomkamp is a big fan of them and he wanted them in the movie. And they're a South African rap group, by the way, so that's probably why I haven't heard of them and I don't know anybody who I know that knows them. And I guess it's kind of neat that Chappie takes place in South Africa just like District 9 did. And there's also a subtle reference to District 9 with one of the logos that one of the characters wears, hinting that it might be the same universe. Though I'm not quite sure if this takes place before or after District 9. I'm not sure what year District 9 took place, in that fictional world that is. Anyway, Die Antwoord are pretty bad in the movie, as far as their acting goes. I mean, I just did not feel for these characters at all. I just really wish it would have focused on Dion and Chappie, not Chappie and Die Antwoord. And one of the guys is actually named Ninja, which is kind of ridiculous. I mean, that's what his actual name is in the rap group, too. Another thing about this movie is it feels like Blomkamp is trying to make it sort of like RoboCop, and it's kind of blatantly obvious with the Hugh Jackman character's design of a robot called the Moose, which looks just like the Ed 209. And speaking of Hugh Jackman's character, he's kind of hilarious. Hugh Jackman's character is jealous of Dion's funding he got for the police force, because he wanted that funding for the Moose. And there's this weird scene where he pulls a gun on him in the middle of work hours in the office, and he says it's a prank. And that scene is just very awkward and weird. It's just like it's written by a 12-year-old. And when he finally does get to use his Moose robot, he kind of like goes mad with power and uses like everything it's capable of. Which, I know he's trying to go for a big payoff at the end, but it feels very unnecessary. Like, the people in the police force even say it's unnecessary. They say the Moose is complete overkill. Because it's not a military force, it's a police force. And the company that Hugh Jackman and the Dion character work for is called Terraval. And apparently Terraval has some terrible security. I mean, I understand they work at the place and they can get the stuff that they need, but where are the security guards? And they only focus on one security camera. But that's another gripe. Back to the Die Antwoord thing. Like I said, the characters are not likable. And they try to make them likable, and you can tell the movie is like trying to force you to have feelings for these people. Kind of like the same way Interstellar tried to force feelings upon you. Because when I watched Interstellar, I was like, okay, I see what you're trying to do, but it's not gonna work. Because when it's obvious, I'm not going to feel it. Movies like that and Chappie just have no sense of subtlety. And the character development is really out of whack. The only thing I kinda understand is Chappie, because he's a robot, and he learns very quickly, though he still acts like a kid. So it's I don't know. Like I said in the podcast, Chappie is crappy. It had potential if the movie would have focused on Dion and Chappie and not the Die-Ant weird. There are some scenes in this movie where it is literally laughable, because my dad and I were actually laughing in the theater at some of the scenes. It's that kind of bad. On the bright side, after seeing Chappie, it got me interested in robotics and AI again, and I started looking up this robot called Paparo by NEC that I've been following for years. So I still want a personal house robot. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Chappie. If you want to hear more, you can go check those links that I mentioned in the beginning. Those are listed in the description below. And if you saw Chappie, tell me what you thought in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye! I'd like to give thanks to my patrons this month. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. And if you want to become a patron, click the annotation. For more movie reviews, click the playlist. And if you've yet to subscribe, subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.
Like soldiers in the middle of a campaign, growing hardened to discomfort and better able to